In a single decision, in just one night, trillions of dollars can disappear from the markets. The financial markets are like a vast ocean, constantly shifting and moving, and all it takes is one decision made in a boardroom or by a group of powerful individuals to send ripples throughout the global economy. Trillions of dollars can vanish just as quickly as they appeared. The financial systems we depend on can be upended in a matter of hours, leaving us scrambling to adjust. What seems stable today can collapse tomorrow without warning. The markets we trust can turn volatile, unpredictable, and chaotic. In an instant, the foundations on which our financial world rests can crumble. Your money, your savings, and your investments are never truly in your control. The illusion of control is something we all live with daily. We believe that by saving, investing, or budgeting, we have some command over our financial future. However, the truth is, most of our financial decisions depend on forces far beyond our reach. They depend on decisions made far from your everyday life. These decisions are often made in distant financial institutions where the vast majority of the population has no direct influence. These are not decisions made on the factory floor or by everyday workers. They are decisions made in central banks, far removed from the daily lives of most people. These decisions are made by people you will likely never meet or vote for. The individuals making these key decisions don't have a personal connection with you. They don't live next door or even in your country. They operate quietly inside central banks. These unelected officials have a tremendous amount of power, and while they may not seek fame or glory, their decisions have far-reaching effects on the global economy. These financial experts working within the shadows hold the key to our economic stability. Their actions shape not just markets, but the very cost of living for millions. They don't wear crowns or stand on political stages. Unlike elected leaders or monarchs, central bankers don't seek the spotlight, yet they control the world's money. Their power is not exercised through speeches or rallies, but through policy decisions that influence the global economy. The tools they wield are far less visible than those of politicians, but they are no less powerful. They make decisions that impact inflation, employment, the cost of borrowing, and even the value of your savings. You might believe central banks are distant institutions with little impact on you. Many people perceive central banks as bureaucratic institutions that operate at arm's length from their lives. They're entities that make decisions that sound complex and unrelatable to everyday people. But every financial choice you make reacts to their decisions. Whether it's paying for groceries, taking out a mortgage, or simply filling your gas tank, central banks are indirectly involved. The policies they set hike interest rates affect almost every part of your financial life. Even when you invest in cryptocurrency, the ripple effect of central bank decisions is felt. These institutions are not just abstract entities, they are active players in shaping your financial landscape. When you buy groceries, pay rent, or take a loan, central bank policy is at work. Every time you make a purchase or take out a loan, the underlying economic conditions that govern those transactions are shaped by central bank policies. Even cryptocurrency markets respond to their signals. For instance, when a central bank raises or lowers interest rates, it has a direct effect on your ability to borrow money, invest, and spend. The rate at which you can take out a loan for your home, car, or business is influenced by central bank decisions. The cost of credit, something so integral to our daily lives, is determined by these institutions. Inflation is not accidental, and recessions are not random events. Central banks have a very deliberate role in managing inflation, a major force that impacts the purchasing power of your money. By 2025, central banks have become the most powerful economic forces on Earth. The choices made in central banks can either curb or fuel inflation, dictate whether we are in a period of economic growth or recession, and even decide how quickly or slowly the economy recovers from a downturn. The markets, businesses, and consumers all depend on the stability that central banks are supposed to maintain. Central banks manage the monetary system of nations and regions. These institutions play a pivotal role in ensuring the proper functioning of a nation's or a region's economy. They decide how money flows through the economy. By controlling the money supply, they dictate the availability of credit and influence economic activity. When central banks raise or lower interest rates, they determine how much money circulates in the economy and whether it's easier or harder for businesses and individuals to borrow money. They control interest rates, regulate money supply, and protect financial stability. Interest rates are one of the most important tools that central banks have in their arsenal. By raising or lowering these rates, they can directly influence borrowing, spending, and investing. These tools shape how economies grow or shrink. When central banks increase interest rates, it makes borrowing more expensive, slowing down spending and investment. Conversely, when rates are lowered, borrowing becomes cheaper, encouraging more economic activity. This delicate balancing act is what central banks must manage to ensure long-term economic stability. The U.S. Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank lead the global system. These two central banks are among the most influential financial institutions in the world. Their decisions don't just affect their own countries, they have a global impact. Their decisions ripple across every major market. Whether it's the value of the US dollar, the stability of the European financial system, or the movement of global stock markets, the policies of the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank are key drivers. Central banks did not always hold this level of power. Historically, central banks were not as influential as they are today. Their influence expanded after global financial crises. It was the financial meltdowns, like the Great Depression or the 2008 financial crash, that led to central banks taking on more power. When crises hit, central banks were given emergency authority to stabilize economies, bail out struggling banks, and prevent further financial collapse. Over time, this expanded authority has become a permanent part of their role. After the 2008 crash, governments gave central banks emergency authority. Following the financial meltdown in 2008, governments around the world granted central banks sweeping emergency powers. That power never fully returned. Once central banks were given this authority, it allowed them to intervene more directly in the economy, making decisions that would have been unthinkable before the crash. The ability to print money, influence interest rates, and regulate the financial markets became a permanent tool in the central bank's playbook. During the COVID era, trillions of dollars were created almost overnight. The COVID-19 pandemic created an unprecedented economic crisis. Central banks around the world responded by injecting massive amounts of money into the economy. Markets survived, but hidden risks multiplied. Trillions of dollars were printed to keep economies afloat, but the long-term risks of such actions remain uncertain. The flood of money into the system created the conditions for potential future instability. It's a temporary fix with lasting consequences. By 2025, inflation, debt, and asset bubbles became the long-term consequences. The actions taken by central banks in the wake of the pandemic were meant to stabilize the economy, but they've also created new risks. The cost of survival was delayed, not eliminated. Debt levels have skyrocketed, inflation has taken root, and asset bubbles have inflated, making it harder for many people to accumulate wealth. The consequences of these actions will be felt for years to come, shaping the financial future of generations. Interest rates are the strongest weapons central banks possess. The power of central banks lies in their ability to manipulate interest rates. They quietly shape economic behavior. When rates rise, borrowing becomes expensive, which causes people to spend less, invest less, and businesses to hold back on expansion. But when rates fall, borrowing becomes cheaper, encouraging more economic activity, though it also increases risk and may lead to inflation or asset bubbles. These decisions are not taken lightly. When rates rise, borrowing becomes expensive and spending slows. Higher interest rates make loans more expensive, which impacts everything from mortgages to car loans to business loans. Businesses hesitate and markets react instantly. When interest rates rise, it sends a signal to the market that borrowing is now more costly. People and businesses adjust their behavior, which can have a cooling effect on the economy. When rates fall, debt grows and risk-taking increases. Low interest rates encourage borrowing and spending, leading to increased debt levels across households and businesses. Asset bubbles often follow. When credit is cheap, people tend to take on more risk, investing in things that might not be sustainable in the long run. This can lead to the formation of bubbles in real estate, stocks, and other assets. This is not theory or speculation. The influence of interest rates on the economy is real, and their effects can be seen in everyday life. It is the psychology of money. Central banks use interest rates to influence economic behavior, shaping the way people and businesses spend, save, and invest. Their decisions are based on economic models, but the results can be unpredictable and far-reaching. In 2023, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates aggressively. In an effort to control rising inflation, the Federal Reserve increased interest rates significantly in 2023. The goal was to control rising inflation. By making borrowing more expensive, the Federal Reserve aimed to slow down the economy and reduce inflation. However, this decision had global consequences, as it impacted currency values, investment markets, and emerging economies. The impact spread far beyond the United States. While the Federal Reserve's decisions directly affected the U.S., their effects were felt globally. Global markets felt the shock. As the U.S. dollar strengthened, other currencies weakened, and global trade became more expensive. Emerging markets, which depend on cheap debt, were hit hardest by the rising costs of borrowing. Cryptocurrency markets crashed under pressure. Cryptocurrency markets, which had gained popularity in the wake of economic instability, were not immune to the effects of central bank decisions. Emerging economies struggled with rising debt costs. The tightening of monetary policy led to a decline in the value of many cryptocurrencies, showing how central bank decisions can affect even the most decentralized markets. One nation's decision created global consequences. Central banks are interconnected, and decisions made by one institution can have far-reaching effects. The system proved deeply interconnected. The Federal Reserve's decision to raise interest rates had consequences, not just for the U.S., but for the entire global financial system. This interconnectedness is a defining characteristic of the modern global economy. Every central bank decision creates winners and losers. For every policy decision, there are beneficiaries and those who suffer the consequences. Stability is never neutral. Large financial institutions often have the resources and information to adapt to changes quickly, while small investors and developing economies bear the brunt of the fallout. Large financial institutions often adapt and benefit first. Big financial institutions are often in a position to weather the storm. They have access to information and protection. Because of their size and influence, they can adjust their strategies to benefit from changes in monetary policy. On the other hand, small investors and developing economies lack the same resources and are more vulnerable to the impacts of central bank decisions. Small investors and developing economies bear the heaviest burden. The everyday person, especially those living in emerging markets, is often the hardest hit by central bank policies. Middle-class families feel the pressure last but longest, while large institutions can adjust to new conditions. Small investors and middle-class families often feel the burden of inflation and rising costs over a prolonged period. The system rarely collapses completely. Though the financial system may face crises, it doesn't usually collapse entirely. Instead, it redistributes pain. Rather than a complete breakdown, the costs of economic instability are redistributed across different groups, with the most vulnerable bearing the brunt. By 2025, central banks face challenges beyond inflation. By 2025, central banks will be addressing issues like climate change, energy crises, and international trade wars. Their role is expanding rapidly. These new challenges will require central banks to adapt their strategies and use their tools in new ways to ensure economic stability. Climate financing, energy shortages, and trade wars demand new strategies. The global economy is facing new risks, and central banks are on the front lines of addressing them. Money is now used as a policy weapon. Central banks are now tasked with managing not only traditional economic risks, but also climate change, energy shortages, and geopolitical tensions that could destabilize the global system. Some central banks are testing digital currencies. Digital currencies may be the next frontier for central banks. These systems could track how money is spent. Central banks are experimenting with digital currencies, which could revolutionize the way money flows through the economy, providing greater transparency and control. The future debate is no longer about economics alone. The future is about power and control. It is about control. Central banks are no longer just economic regulators, they are becoming political players who determine how money is used and who gets to control it. Central banks claim their mission is stability. Central banks maintain that their primary role is to ensure economic stability, but stability has a price. While they work to maintain calm in the financial system, the long-term effects of their policies can lead to rising debt, inequality, and financial instability. Markets recover while debt continues to grow. The markets may bounce back from a crisis, but the debt continues to grow, leading to further risks down the line. Ordinary people struggle to keep up. As governments and businesses take on more debt to maintain stability, it is often the everyday person who bears the long-term costs. Money today does not move freely. Today, money is no longer free to move in and out of markets without restrictions. It moves by design. Central banks control the flow of money, dictating how and when it moves through the economy. If this video made you question how the system works, stay curious. The world of money is complex and ever-changing, and it's important to understand the forces that drive it. Understanding money is understanding power. By understanding how money works, you gain insight into how the global system functions and the forces that shape our future. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. Do central banks protect the economy or quietly control it?